Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second part of this three-part video on the love series, how to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And now I'm going to be talking about the juicy meat of it all, Seduction 101. So in reading, I want to start off by saying in reading, there are two strategies that you typically do, which is skimming and scanning. So skimming is when you look at a book, but just very generally, think of you being at a library or at a bookstore, and you're considering buying the book, and you're just getting the gist of it, right? You're skimming through it. And another reading strategy is scanning. That's when you specifically look like in a dictionary for a word, right? So what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to consider your context, right? Whether it's a work context, a school context, right? Wherever you are, skim and scan, right? And you need to basically kind of identify the people that you would be willing to engage in a romantic relationship with, right? Identify these people that you probably already have them identified if you're into some of those people or if you like them, right? So basically consider what targets do you have? What people do you have in your sight that you would probably want to get to know further, right? But you really haven't done that. And if you already watched my first part, you've already done some physical changes to yourself. You've expanded your vocabulary. You've seen models of interviews where people are engaging in this back and forth conversation, right? So you're basically ready now to get out into the field, into the social arena of things. Now, as soon as you have your targets, right, what you're going to want to do is apply some of Robert Greene's techniques on seduction. Robert Greene has a great book on seduction. It's called Seduction. And he talks about various things. Now, some of them are combining distance with closeness, or distance with basically like being close to the person, right? And this is kind of like that tactic where you see people get close to someone and then distance themselves, and then get close to someone and distance themselves, right? And this is kind of like a thing where a lot of people say, this is confusing. But what it does ultimately is that when you're close to someone, you give them what you would give them, like in a relationship, right? You give them like a sample. And then when you distance yourself away from the person, you create absence, right? And that's very important. When you create that absence, ultimately what that person is going to generate in their mind is the feeling of missing you, right? So you create that distance, and by creating that distance, when you come back, you'll be liked. Because if you're always there, if you're always with the person, you're not going to allow that person to miss you, and they're not going to value you, right? Because when you distance yourself, you create absence and you create value, right? Why does it work? How does it work? Who knows, but it works, right? So that's one of the tips. So you distance yourself very subtly, right? You don't make it like very obvious that you're not going to be around anymore. You just disappear, right? And then you were, when you come back, the person may ask you, where were you? Oh, I had to do these other things, like, like casually, right? So you combine closeness and distance, right? That back and forth, generating absence. You can also do these things where you create an air of spirituality, right? Robert Greene talks a lot about making reference to spiritual topics. Like, even if you're not religious, right? You could be atheist. You make reference to these type of like otherworldly concepts, right? Like dreams, right? You could talk about dreams, right? Like, I had this crazy dream last night, right? Or like, within earshot of your targets, right? So even if they appear not to be listening, they'll still listen, right? Like using religious expressions, right? Such as like, you could say, oh my God, or things like that, right? But again, all of this is not going to be explicit. It's going to be very subtly, right? Using the word religiously, right? Like, yeah, I do exercise religiously, right? Like this notion of spirituality, right? of being in contact with like your higher self, with your soul, right? And transmitting this to your targets, right? That's also important. And here you have to keep in mind that seduction is a very slow process. Now these videos are quick, so you can get the information, but when you're actually out there doing this may take some time, right? Seduction is a very slow and marked process, so you're going to want to do things that are very that are high in quality, very punctual, but very short-lived, right? Something as simple as saying to the person that you like, for example, like, you look good today, and that's it, right? And just leaving, right? So something like simple, but that's like of value. You know what I mean? And you do this throughout the days, throughout the weeks, right? So it's not going to be, you can't get desperate. Desperation is the worst thing you can do in seduction. So you can't, if you're that type of person, which you might be, and that's okay. If you're that type of person that gets desperate and you're like, I just want to know what's going on, you kind of have to put that off to the side and just kind of flow with it, right? And do these very like punctual marked things, right, throughout the days and the weeks, right, that basically seem to go nowhere, but with time they start to accumulate, right? That's kind of the thing there. Okay, and the last tip is kind of a manipulation tactic, but I think it may be one of the most effective ones. It's called creating triangles. So you may know about this. What you do ultimately is, let's say you have your target, right? You have the person you like. So you use someone close to that person, right? To kind of make that person you like jealous, right? Or just kind of like engage. So you create like this triangle of three people, right? So let's say you like a guy or a girl and they have a friend, right? And it doesn't really matter if they're a boy or a girl, as long as there's a third person there, right? Like, let's say you like a guy and, he has a friend who's a girl, right? And you're a girl and you approach both of them, but you seem to kind of ignore the guy and talk more to the girl in front of the guy, right? And again, you're creating like that triangle because it's a human thing, right? It's kind of like, you're not paying attention to me, you're kind of ignoring me, right? Again, you don't want to do this like extensively, right? You don't want to, like, if it's a guy and a guy, you don't want to get with the guy's friend or make a boyfriend of the guy's friend that you like, right? What you would want to do there is just simply talk to the person, right? Pay a little bit, and I'm not saying ignore the guy you like, for example. If it's a girl, the same thing. I'm just saying pay a little bit more attention, right? It seems innocent, but it's kind of there, right? Where you're gonna make this other person kind of think to themselves like, why are they ignoring me? So you create this triangle, right? And as a conclusive remark, what I want to mention is the emotional topics. Now, how do you know if you're making progress with someone in seduction? You go from the logical, right, from the very formal and just talking about the weather and the taxes and the government and the boss or the teacher or whatever. You go from those type of mental topics to more like emotional topics from the heart, right? Like, how do you feel? Those type of topics, emotions, right? Now, word of advice here, very important, right? Like, side note here. If you can't get the person to open up emotionally, right? Like they just keep dodging the emotional topics, right? And they don't really let you in to their heart, so to say. Then you're not gonna have access to that person. So you might as well just discard that person, step away, because that's not where it is. That's not where home is, right? You're not gonna make that person fall in love with you. You're not gonna have a relationship with that person. So just step away from there, right? Now, this is tricky. A person, on the other hand, you can have a person who is always emotional with you, who is always talking to you about how they feel, right? Very emotional, right? And they talk to you about their deepest, darkest secrets, emotions, problems, family situations, whatever, right? But that person doesn't want you as a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? The problem there, and that happens too. You shouldn't get confused. That shouldn't confuse you. You shouldn't say, well, they lead me on, right? They tell me very personal things, and and I think they may want something serious with me later on, so I'm just gonna stick around. No, it's not gonna happen. That person sees you as a friend only. They see you as someone that they can talk to. That's it, right? Like a friend, because that also exists. There exist relationships between men and women that are romantic for the most part, but there may also, you could say, but that's a guy and I'm a girl, or I'm a boy and that's a girl. you know yeah, but think of it like brothers and sisters. It's not going to go beyond that, or the person just simply doesn't see you like that. I'm sorry, right? So in those cases, you have to make the decision. You know what? I either see you as a friend, and I'm okay with that, or you know what? I'm stepping back because this is going to hurt me in the long run, right? Um, so if you get, let's say, just kind of like to recap in this case, Seduction 101, you need to skim and scan, right? Your context, get to know your targets, who do you want for potential romantic partners, right? Combine Robert Greene's seduction tactics, uh, you know, um, kind of filling in the person's head with spiritual topics or otherworldly topics, right? If you're really into any type of topics that are otherworldly topics, bring them up, talk about them, let the person know that you like those type of topics. Use distance and absence. And just remember that seduction is a slow, marked steps process, right? Create triangles if you can, with whatever. And I'm thinking right now, like even pets or whatever. And how do you know that your seduction is being successful? Because you'll go from the logical to the emotional, right? And again, when you're in the emotional, if you can't make that jump from the logical to the emotional, then you're not going to have access to that person at all, right? That's, so just discard that person, step back. And if it's a person that is always opening up to you emotionally, but they seem to not want anything beyond that, then they probably don't want anything beyond that. I'm sorry. So just, again, step away, because they only see you as a friend. Now, if you get into from the logical to the emotional effectively, and now things are going places, right? And that's a very good criteria to use, right? Because I've heard a lot of people in my life say, well, I don't know if this person is into me or wants something serious with me or wants a relationship with me. And I think that's a very good criteria point to use, right? Like emotional. If your guys are talking about the emotional, this should just flow, right? It should never be something as explicit as, like, eventually you'll get there, but it's going to be obvious when you ask the person, like, what are we? Are we boyfriend, girlfriend? Are we exclusive? Are you my boyfriend? Are you my girlfriend? Right? But by then it will be obvious, right? So what you're going to want to do is get in through the emotional, right? And if you effectively get in through the emotional and things are, flowing, and things are working out naturally, right? Because all of this has to be natural, of course. You're not going to manipulate your way through a long-term relationship. And this is only for long-term relationships, not like hooking up. But if you get in through that emotional and you are able to establish a relationship, a romantic exclusive relationship with someone, right, that you like, then the next step now is going to be working through the problems together, right? And making the relationship last, right? So that's what I'm going to be talking about in the third video. So be on the lookout for that one coming soon. And let me know what you think about this. If you already saw my first part, good. If you didn't, go and watch that one first, and then you can watch this one again to kind of get that context in. And yeah, that's all I got for this one. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.